Okay, happy Friday, everyone. We are delighted to have Sean Siebel here. For the first time, we're doing a virtual series. We're going to see how this works for the M-Squared community. Sean lives in New York City. He's a senior user experience evangelist, and he's got some great insights and experience working on lots of our platforms, but more recently with the Metro and Windows 8 platforms. So he's going to talk about the Windows 8 Metro experience. You don't have to hold your questions. You can go ahead and post your questions in the IM window or open up your mute button and then just talk about them. So with that, Sean, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mary. This is Sean Siebel. I'm a senior user experience evangelist for Microsoft. I'm based in New York City. And being in New York City, if you can hear, there's sirens in the background right now. That's usually a normal occurrence, so throughout this entire presentation, you'll probably hear sirens going. I seem to be on the path of a lot of hospitals and fire departments. I'm a senior user experience evangelist at Microsoft. I typically do an 8-hour design session where I'm training digital designers on Metro style design for Windows 8. I'm trying to capture the essence of that in this 1-hour presentation. If you have questions, like I said, this is a small group, so please feel free to jump in at any time if there's anything you want me to go deeper on or things that you already know about and want me to move forward. So I'll go ahead and get started and explain to you what I actually do. I am a user experience evangelist. People always ask me if that's a title that I've made up. I hand out business cards. They printed it on business cards, so it's official. But it really means at the end of the day, I'm a designer. Historically, before coming to Microsoft many years ago, I was a director of user experience strategy and design for a Madison Avenue agency working on digital experiences across many major brands that were our clients. But at Microsoft, as a designer and as a user experience evangelist, my real job is to help Microsoft partners. That's individuals, that's brands, that's agencies, that's developers. Deliver user experience excellence in Windows 8, Windows Phone, and Xbox 360 Connect. But I'm not going to talk about code or ARM devices. I am a designer. If you're going to ask me about the code behind that, I have many other much more qualified people on my team that can answer those questions. If you want to direct them to me via email or reach out to people around me that you may know of, please do. I don't like to talk about ARM devices either. Those things are little gray areas, and there's a lot of news surrounding that. You can keep up with that. What I do want to talk about is really how to design a Windows Metro-style application. And before we get into what Metro-style apps are, I'd like to make sure that everybody is reminded to go to design.windows.com. That's design.windows.com. We keep this up to date on a daily basis. This is all the user experience guidelines, all the design patterns and assets such as Photoshop templates, animation samples, etc., that are associated with Metro style UX design, and this is updated on a daily basis and sometimes by the minute. So this is where you're going to find all your information in very specific details. Like I said, I teach an 8-hour course typically during the day, and when you need to go deep, when you have a design challenge at hand, when you're working on your apps, please refer to design.windows.com. So you're hearing a lot about Metro. You know, that word is used in the news and conversations with people at Microsoft. Everything Windows 8 related always comes back to the word Metro. And everybody's always asking, well, you know, is that just a code name for the design language that you've developed for Windows 8? What I'd like to do is just go back a little in history and look at where we came from to see where we arrived at and what Metro actually is. So if you take a look just one version ago of a number of our products, and we're looking at phone, Windows, and Xbox of the user experience of those operating systems, you'll see that they're very disconnected. Here's Windows Mobile, and this is one version ago at 6.5. I think I was running this on a Samsung Blackjack. This is the Xbox 360 dashboard just a very short time ago, and this was the most the previous version of the Xbox 360 dashboard. And if we're talking about Windows 8 today, we can think about Windows 7 as being the last version of Windows, and everybody's probably very familiar with this desktop. So the biggest challenge we've had at Microsoft when we're reimagining an operating system to be able to accommodate so many different types of form factors and input methods is being able to predict what those devices may be. When we launch an operating system, we have no idea what manufacturers are intending to launch them on. We have some assumptions what they may be. It's going to have a screen that's rectangular in shape and 4 sides, 4 corners, and it's going to be one of the multiple or a collection of different input methods. You've got touch. You've got keyboard, you've got mouse, you even have pen input. You've got desktop, laptop, tablet, hybrid devices, small screens, large screens. So when we've taken a look at how we can design an operating system that can suit all of those different screens, and also think about, when we just took a look at the different platforms across phone and Xbox, how do you unify experience across multiple devices and form factors and multiple platforms under one Microsoft experience? So we designed a design language called Metro, and Metro is not just Windows 8. If you see, as we showed you earlier, we needed to create a design language that we can unify different platforms and different form factors. But why do we call it Metro, and where did it get its inspiration? If you think about the places on the planet where no matter what your language is, what your cultural background, geography in the world, that the environment is suitable to all of these different factors, being able to clearly give you directions, labels, and give people a means to make quick decisions. It's in airports, in train stations, in places of transit, especially international airports and train stations, where you've got people speaking so many different languages from different cultural backgrounds and having different different contexts of how they understand things. So we created this Metro design language, taking inspiration from international design, international travel, and applied it to all of our platforms and to Windows 8. So looking at this metaphor of design, let's take a look at how it landed. Actually, this is a different presentation. I apologize. So we have 5 tenets of Metro-style design that we apply to all of these experiences on Windows Phone, Windows 8, and Xbox 360. First and foremost is doing more with less. It's easier said than done. Taking pride in craftsmanship, making sure that every pixel on your screen counts and everything is deliberate in the design that you deliver. Being fast and fluid, making sure that you're giving people visual cues and also rewarding them for being able to navigate and interact with your application very quickly. And being authentically digital. Digital can be so much more than physical metaphors around you. Don't constrain yourself or limit yourself by thinking about your digital experience of being bound to a physical experience. And winning is one. You're not going to have, as a user, only one app on your application or on Windows 8 or any one of our devices. You're going to have other applications there as well. So think about how they can beautifully mix together. There's different ways that apps will interact with each other that you never thought of before, and we'll explore that in a little bit. So going on with that travel metaphor, how did it land? So let's take a look at Windows Phone. We launched this in November of 2010, and this is a beautiful Nokia Lumia 800 or 900 here. We also refreshed the Xbox 360 dashboard in December of 2011, and this is how Metro landed there. And what's interesting about Xbox 360 is that we've also incorporated Kinect. So not only are you interacting in the traditional means through a controller, you're also using gesture and voice to interact with your Xbox 360. And this is the most sophisticated execution of the Metro design user experience is Windows 8. And this is, of course, the start screen of Windows 8 here. And I'll go ahead and pause. I saw that Mary just said that Brian had a question. And I'm sorry, when I'm presenting, I'm not always reading the stream here.
Yeah, so the question, Sean, is if you can clarify from a developer standpoint, what exactly are the elements of a design language? And I'm thinking here it's the iconography, it's the font, and graphics, probably.
So this design language, it's also what you don't visually see, right? There's a number of things here. It's, when we're talking about user experience design, it can go far beyond just what you see and experience. It's also the way that things are connected on the back end, the way that apps interoperate with each other, et cetera. And I think we're going to explore that, but those 5 tenets that I shared with you earlier, let me go back to that slide. These are the 5 principles or tenets, if you want to call them that, of Metro-style design. And these are what really compose the design language, and we're going to be exploring each one of these through this presentation. So, and as you can see, the challenge is being met with Windows 8 of exploring all these different form factors. And an interesting thing to show here is that every one of these form factors is displaying a Windows 8 Metro style application or the start screen specifically here in a portrait, sorry, not a portrait, a landscape aspect. Being that we're not only a touch-first operating system for tablet form factors, but also a desktop, laptop, and all types of hybrid devices, that the only required view when you're designing a Windows 8 Metro-style application is landscape. And we'll get more into that in just a moment. So, doing more with less. It's always very easy to say that. I think, it's been popular to say do more with less or, minimal design for a very long time. But there's, when you start, as a developer or a product owner in thinking about putting product features into an app, and then those apps, the app that you're trying to design and develop starts having a very long list of features that you must incorporate, and you start thinking about how can you actually accomplish it doing more with less. So at Microsoft, with the Metro-style design language that we created for Windows 8, we've done a lot of the thinking for you, and in giving you ways to reduce all that visual clutter and use our interface and design language and interaction language so that you don't have to think about these things all the time. We're going to set these out with a lot of guidelines for you, and I'll show you this right now. So we did a very interesting exercise when we were trying to reimagine Windows. We took our existing product, Windows 7, and we went to non-technical people and had them experience Windows 7, and then gave them a pad of paper and said, can you sketch the experience for us? What they did was they drew what is obviously here a taskbar with a start button and some icons or apps pinned to the taskbar. You see what's obviously a window here with a menu bar and a minimize, restore, and close, and a scroll bar. What this really demonstrates here is that people are remembering the interface and not the content. They didn't sketch out what was inside the window. They didn't sketch out any of the photos or files or videos or websites they go to. What they really just sketched was the experience that they had with the interface. So what we did through a number of trials and finally arrived at what you know now as the Windows 8 Metro style user experience is tested that with the same group of users and told them to sketch that experience. So we got a strong feeling that we're headed in the right direction because what they sketched out was the title of the app or the header of the screen that they're on, which is explaining what the content is in front of them, and the tiles that have each piece of content or item of content. And so we realize that with this design, what people take away from their experience with Windows 8, or what we were testing as Windows 8 at the time, is they're remembering the content, not the interface, or what we traditionally call the Chrome. So content before Chrome, and doing more with less, what we really want to do is make sure with the Windows 8 Metro Style experience is that the content is the heart of the experience. That it's not about where you can possibly go and every possible means of navigation. Everybody's used to using websites right now, and if you look at websites, you realize that through navigation and everything that's available on screen, your headers, your footers, your menu bars, your tabs, that it's always distracting what's on the screen right there. People have gotten used to about ignoring all that content or all that interface and just trying to focus on the content. But we've wanted to make this content really the heart of the experience by giving you a lot of controls and a lot of thought behind where you can place commands and actions, and I'll show you more of that in just a moment. So by going through a number of exercises, and we'll explore that here today, is that you can start removing all the visual distractions, removing commands and actions, and leaving just the most relevant elements on your screen when you're designing your application. And this whole exercise, as I just said a moment ago, is to solve for distraction and not discoverability. You know, when you're thinking about discoverability of having every possible menu item on screen, every tab, every bit of interface, you're trying to expose that we have a big app, we have a big website, we have a big digital experience. What you want to do is have people experience the content, live the content that's on screen at the moment, and know that you do have more content there just by means of the way you lay out your application, and we'll show you that in just a moment here as well. And it goes without saying, you know, we want to actually, at the end of the day, have people being immersed into the experience that you're delivering, whether it's an application for your brand, for an individual, productivity, fun, entertainment. We just want them to be immersed in the experience of the app that they've downloaded and chosen to install, and love the experience that they're having. So, you know, Chrome is typically added for these requirements, right? When we're talking about interface, we're looking at layout, the interaction, and navigation. So how do we go through an exercise of removing some of these items from the screen and creating less distraction, but having them still available or implied so that users can always have them when they need to use them? So layout, you know, layout is very important when you're trying to structure the design of your application, because you can actually create a lot of visual clarity with crisp graphical elements, and through a number of simple exercises, you can reduce the amount of clutter that's on screen, and that's through removing lines and boxes. And you can organize content with more white space or a visual hierarchy with typography, etc. And when you look at being able to give content more breathing room and more intentional use of space, you don't need these lines and boxes to group and organize content that you typically do. Like, think about what you're using right now with a lot of applications in your life. The means of compartmentalizing, differentiating different content is by putting them in a box or putting lines around them. So let's take a look at, say, a simple application. This, you know, could be any application. Right now, this is specifically an RSS reader. This could be a web application. This could be a desktop application. But there's a lot of content being differentiated by boxes and lines. And in fact, the most important content on the screen here is only being displayed in 25%, which is the actual news article. Everything else is just your interface, you know, or the Chrome. It's all the folders you go into to take a look at different feeds, and you've got all your headlines, individual news items. And this is taking up a lot of screen real estate, taking up a lot, you know, taking away pixels from the actual meaningful content and the content that people should be immersed in, which is the actual news article. But let's go through an exercise here, something very simple. You can do this with any app that you're designing today or redesigning for, Windows 8, and remove the lines. So not much has changed, and I still clearly understand how to use this application, but we removed the lines. I'll show you before and after again. Of course, this isn't a Metro-style application, but just this simple exercise of removing boxes and lines, how you can reduce a lot of visual clutter, and there's still enough differentiation between the way things are laid out and aligned that you still understand how this application works. And, removing boxes and lines is just an example of how you can make things very beautiful, throwing out, this doesn't even exist anymore. This is one of our previous weather applications that we use as a reference app, and now there's an updated one with release preview. But, people come up to me all the time and say, well, if I remove all the boxes and lines and I really only have simple controls like an audio player or, a small piece of content on screen, what do I do with all that white space? It looks, sometimes people like to use the word boring. I'm not going to say it's boring. I'm a designer, so I love white space. But if you think about what you can do to immerse people in that experience and also use appropriate visuals, white space can be beautiful. Like here. So also from an interaction perspective, how do we remove Chrome or the interface when it comes to giving people visual cues on how they can interact with content? So a lot of times you see applications that have something laid out like this. Every single piece of content here, you can imagine that this is categories for different types of products within a store. Clearance sale, gifts for kids, holiday shopping, home and garden, everything for winter, etc. And every single item here, each category is clearly defined that there's more, by specifying with an arrow to the right. Now, I would think that if I went into an application and I saw each one of these tiles being represented with maybe a photo and these category titles, that they can be directly manipulated by just tapping or clicking on them and going directly into that section of category of products. I don't need to have an arrow on every single tile specifying that there's more there. So it's already implied. Remove it. And again, more visual clarity, and each one of those titles now aren't being distracted by having a repetitive arrow being applied to every single one of those tiles. And these may seem like very simple exercises to go through, but you'd be surprised at how often when you're discussing with your teams, even designers, developers, product managers, business stakeholders, like, well, people won't know that there's more content or more items. They need to have some type of visual cue. And that's fear. And it's not necessarily the truth. And I'd like to pause here for a moment and kind of relate this to also what I hear all the time with designing the Metro-style applications for Windows 8. Since we haven't even released product and we're working on so many different branded applications right now on Windows 8, I work on many hundreds of applications with all the top brands and designers and developers all across the United States. And I get the one thing over and over again. Well, if we remove things like on-screen visual cues to show that there's more or any type of targets or buttons on the screen, I'm worried that people using our app for the first time won't understand how to use it. Now, this is something to always consider, and this is really good ammunition for when you have to fight your design battles, when you're talking to people who don't really have a good initial understanding of Windows 8 on your teams, is that it's not your job to teach people how to use Windows 8. That's our job at Microsoft, and as a community of app publishers, if all apps are going to be using these design guidelines and design conventions and our design language, that all apps will be able to be interacted with the same way. And don't think of your app as the only app and the first app a user is going to ever install on Windows 8. We're going to have apps that are pre-installed, our own first-party applications, as well as people are always going to have more than one app installed on Windows 8, and all those apps that follow these design conventions will teach learned behaviors to users so they can anticipate and expect the same experience from app to app to app. So that was my little commercial. Remember, it's our job, not your job, to teach people how to use Windows 8. So from interaction perspective, so how do we take away some of those visual distractions and on-canvas, on-screen commands? Well, you've probably seen this before, but I'll stress this even more here, is that we want to leverage the edge, right? There's things that we can anticipate that every user will have. I know there's probably people here on the call that are fans of The Office. You watch The Office, and Sabre Systems has that three-sided screen, the triangle, the Sabre triangle. Well, fortunately, there are no three-sided screens, and there's no five-sided screens in mass production. What there always are going to be, and what we can always expect to have with any device, is a rectangular screen with 4 sides, 4 corners. So we like to leverage the edge here, and very simply, is if we're going to take away some of the interface here, commands, actions from this application that we've been reducing and making more Metro-styled previously, this RSS reader, you'll see that, okay, now what we've done is given more real estate to the screen by taking away commands from the screen, commands that you see on top, like all items, search, settings, refresh, etc. Remove those. Removed also some of the interface of the folders. Removed the folders, but instead of just listing all the individual items here, you see with each article, we are now showing articles. We still have tabs across the top here, and this is an iteration. We're not done yet. And what we've now is given more of the screen, 80% of the screen, to content. And so we have 5 items in content with maybe the first paragraph, enough for people to get interested for the Pioneer Woman here. But there's other RSS feeds that we have here subscribed to. And as we iterate, let's take that same idea of bringing content forward and not hiding it deep inside the app and making people navigate to it. Instead, bringing it up to this panoramic view of what we call the hub of the home screen of this RSS reader application. So as you see here now, we've taken the Pioneer Woman, Closet Cooking, Just Bento, etc., and surfaced 4 items of content here. Now, the number is arbitrary. It all depends on what you think is relevant, what the users want to see, how much content is refreshed, how much your server load can take. There's a lot of variables there on the numbers of what's appropriate there. But we've surfaced more content from each one of these feeds, and we've exploded each one of those tabs that typically you'd have to tap on to see content from up to this hub level, and it's a horizontally panable interface here. And there's a lot of science that is gone behind this, and there's, like I said, an 8-hour training day that I typically deliver to designers, and I go more deeper into the science. But just to let you know, we found that the reason why we have things in a horizontal panoramic view is for the ergonomics of reading and also the ergonomics of touch. Being a touch-first experience, but also no compromise for keyboard and mouse. What we found is that there's less mechanical movements with a swipe when you're panning left and right with your thumbs than a hinged movement with your thumb. Now think about just holding the device right now, pulling your thumbs up for a moment and trying to hinge your thumbs up and down to actually scroll. There's a lot more motor activity that's going on than just a simple swipe to left to right. It's more natural, more fluid, and easier to be accomplished. So where did all those commands and actions go that we saw previously that were removed from the screen to dedicate more screen real estate and pixels to content? We have it on what we call the app bar. A swipe from the bottom of the screen will always produce the same type of result in the operating system and in every application, and also providing contextual menus for items selected. So you can imagine this being either the right click when you're using your mouse, swiping up from below, or there's hotkeys that can trigger the app bar also appearing. And just to head off some of the questions in the past, you know what, contextually, and if there's activities on screen that require the app bar to be in focus or visible for that type of activity or what's being presented on screen, there are instances where it may be appropriate that you have it in view as opposed to being out of view. But it's not going to be something that people have to learn over and over and over again. Once they learn it, they'll know that applications will have their commands and actions in this app bar. And if you have installed Windows 8 Release Preview or previous version, you know from the apps that you've downloaded from the store or the first-party apps that all apps with a swipe from below will always have commands and actions there. What you also have is a global system user interface for searching, sharing, going back to the start screen, being able to interact with devices and the settings of your application from swiping from the right. Now, if you have any experience with Windows 8 to this date, you'll know that it's consistent throughout the entire operating system in any application. When you swipe from the right, you will always get your system UI. And the system UI always has these 5 charms. They do not change. There are always these 5 charms, and they provide a lot of features that can enhance the experience of your application or enhance another application's experience by allowing your application to interact with that. And we can talk about that in a little bit. So now this is an interface. This is a photo viewing app, or an example of what a viewing app can be, or this can be a video application. And, you know, this is, you know, what an optimal experience should be for photo or video. And you're looking at where's the interface. And just like we said with utilizing the edges, if we swipe in from the right or from below, and we need our app bar or our system UI, we get it. Now we have title, we have our back trigger, and we also have all of our commands and actions associated with this photo that we can deliver. But as I said before, when you're looking at photos, this is what the most optimal experience is. You have an interface. It's on demand. And I always like to use Internet Explorer 10 on Windows 8, right now the release preview, to show the true beauty of the Metro-style user experience. And for one reason, and one reason only, is that, you know what, everybody uses a web browser, and there's different branded web browsers out there, and they typically try to deliver a very consistent experience. And, you know, knowing that you understand how to use a web browser and you use it every day, you can see how we've interpreted the Metro-style user experience with Internet Explorer 10. So if anybody has an experience out there of using it in real time, and I know these are slides and it's hard to demonstrate necessarily over link, but you'll see that whenever you need your user experience or your UI, you swipe up from below and you have your commands, your forward you know, and back buttons, you have your reload or refresh, you have your pinning, and you have other options that are contextual to what's on screen. And of course you have your address and search bar, and your tabs are located across the top, and you can navigate between them by tapping or clicking on them, or you can add a new browser tab, or you can remove them by tapping or clicking on the X. And, you know, when you think about it, when you're experiencing a website, you have the interface that's intended for you to experience. You have the website's interface. So we let the browser interface disappear and let the interface of the website be immersive to you as a user, instead of having a stacked interface of both the website experience of their interface and the web browser interface. But when you need it, it's there, just with a simple swipe. So We talked a little about this earlier and being able to have contextual commands for specific items on screen. Let's go back to our reference application as we've iterated here. So now with a simple swipe on one item, it's a simple swipe, we have just a contextual menu with the app bar showing commands and apps that are global to what's on screen right now. But if I swiped onto a specific item, and you can actually experiment with this right now. If you go into your start screen and swipe on individual tiles of applications and content, you'll see that a contextual menu pops up. So here, now that I've swiped on an individual item, I have a contextual command that allows me to tap on read, or I can maybe mark it as a favorite and things like that, or say read later. In the way that we remove that, there's probably people on this call that use To-Do. I'm very, very methodical about my day and using the to-do list. And to-do lists, especially web to-do lists, if you use any of them, are notorious for putting every single contextual action or command on each line. It's repetitive, it takes away from and distracts and takes away a lot of screen real estate from each one of those line items. So, it's very simple here by going and leveraging the edge and using the app bar and contextual menus associated with that app bar. You can remove all that repetitive interface that's distracting and taking away real estate. Now you have either more breathing room and more focus on the title, or you can have actually more pixels on screen to place type, to have longer title names for each one of these products here. But where are they? As we showed you earlier, with a swipe on individual items, you have a contextual menu that's associated to that. And, think about this as being your new right-click. You can right-click on an individual item on your start screen to experience this. And in this example here, you'd right-click on a content tile and have a contextual menu that comes up in the app bar from below that shows you all the commands that are associated with it. And you should only be showing commands that people can act on. A lot of times people want to show commands that may be there sometimes, and they gray them out. Don't do that. Just show commands. Don't give people ideas of what they could possibly do and have a mystery there why they can't possibly use a grayed out selection. Only show them in your contextual menu commands and actions that they can actually use at that on that item or content item. So navigation, very important when we're thinking about how to design your navigation scheme for your application for a Metro Style app. What I like to do is take a look at websites a lot, because if you've been in digital for a long time, either a designer or a developer, you've probably spent a lot of time in your life designing web experiences or developing for web experiences before you've gone to native applications. So, this is, an example website of a food truck website here. And I'd like to go through the exercise of just taking a look at what is actually necessary if you're to take a website experience and, say, optimize it, or if you're thinking about how to take a website and create a Metro-style experience from it. So let's just start looking at items that are required versus items that are not required when you are displaying any type of content on screen. So if we were to just take a look at what's most important here, what's most important is the brand, to know, to let people know that this is Contoso Food Trucks, the featured content, and different items of articles for these food truck categories here. So you realize everything else here on the screen is either interface where you can possibly go, legal disclaimers, maybe advertising or a third-party content. Not saying that advertising is important. If you're monetizing your app with advertising, that's a different conversation. But the core of the experience, when you're thinking about what you're trying to immerse your user in when you're designing an experience, is really just the brand and the content. So let's start iterating here. If you look at this, this follows a basic Metro style, but you know what? There's a menu here on the left there could be actually more content items on screen if we just remove those menu items. So we consider that Chrome or interface. Let's remove that. And, if people have the habit of wanting to use tabs, again, people look at designing and developing native applications just the way that they have been designing websites and developing websites in the past. So again, using tabs, we don't want to look at it in a sense of just a tabular interface. We want to actually surface all that content with each one of those tabs, remove that interface, and push that up, all that content each in one of those tabs up to the surface of the application at this hub level, and be able to represent each one of those tabs across that hub level in a panorama here. So now you see each one of those tabs are actually showing content at the surface of your application, and you can pan on a horizontal level from left to right and represent content that is typically hidden within each one of those tabs. So you expose more content, easily available and readily able to be interacted with. And in fact, those tabs still perform the function that they did previously, but so much more. If you tapped on any one or clicked on any one of those subheaders that were previously just tabs, they still operate just like tabs and go into that section and show you all content that's there, but you're surfacing maybe the most recent, the most popular content to the surface and giving people more value to their experience and giving them a means to immerse themselves in content immediately when they start up your application. And then there's something that's very, very powerful and interesting that I hope a lot of you think about when you design your application, is also using semantic zoom for navigation. Semantic zoom may simply be used to, say, go from a sea level, and when I say sea level, I mean SEA, to a 30,000-foot level view of your app or the contents within your application. You can experience this right now on the start screen of Windows 8. If you pinch to a semantic zoom, you'll see all of your applications on your start screen at a very high level. And then you can also, at that high level, manage sections of applications by moving them around on screen as groups or naming groups for easier identification of your applications that have been installed. But there's so many interesting things that you can do with semantic zoom, and we'll go into that in just a moment. But I'd like everybody here that is considering and will be designing and developing Windows 8 Metro-style Windows 8 apps in the future to really leverage semantic zoom at its most basic level, but we'll go into some ideas later of how you can really use it to provide a lot of visual value to the user when you're using semantic zoom. So let's go on to pride and craftsmanship as another philosophy or tenet of Metro-style design, and that really means taking pride in every pixel that you place on screen. And first and foremost, when it comes to a lot of applications, it's the use of typography that can really show your information. It's when you're using applications, unless they're gaming or video or photo applications, typography is heavily used. So really use typography to create a beautiful experience in Windows 8 and Metro-style applications. As you saw earlier, the inspiration comes from international travel, and you see when you're in airports, and I'm sure a lot of you have had the experience of being in airports or train stations, and the clear typography that's used to be able to clearly state direction, instructions, without any type of distraction around it, no visual distraction to clutter the view of that typography. But there's a lot of ways you can use typography to really provide a sense of structure and rhythm and hierarchy with your content. It doesn't, in a way that you don't have to rely on lines and boxes that we may have in the past with traditional digital design. You can alternate between size and weight, between light, regular, and bold, and different sizes of your font and your typography to really establish that information hierarchy. So we've created a type ramp, and you're going to see Sego as one of the default fonts, and it is the official Windows 8 Metro style font. But it's not always the only font that you must use, and if you have a very specific branded experience, your brand has a very specific font that you use, you can use other fonts, but by default, this is what we've delivered in all of our templates in Visual Studio, in Photoshop, in all of our design guidance. And the reason is that Sego has been designed specifically to be able to be rendered on screen and legible across different scales of resolution, pixel densities, and at these recommended sizes, so that it can be legible. So if you were to ever use another typeface, make sure you test it on different screen resolutions, different pixel densities, and at these different sizes. And we have this type ramp at various sizes for consistent use of page headers, of subheaders, of body copy, and tertiary info. And if you look at how we apply that to a screen layout here, 42 points when it comes to screen headers, subheaders, 20 points, body content, 11 points, and you can differentiate, through bold and non-bolding this 11-point typography here of whether it's content header or content body text. And tertiary info, maybe it's supplemental content at 9 point, but nothing should be smaller than 9 point. Because then it's just going to be illegible. Say, somebody is installing your application on a 7-inch tablet form factor. Something beyond or smaller than 9 points is going to be very illegible to the user. And here's that type ramp again. And I jumped ahead of myself there because I'm so used to people raising their hands immediately when I'm talking about using our default font of Sego for their UI. But the thing is that we also have Cambria, which if you need a serif font, you can use that as default. But if you have a brand, we're not trying to say change your entire brand, change your typography, but you must test it across that type ramp. So another thing, we've got developers on the call, and a lot of times I talk to developers. Designers really understand the concept of the grid, but I think developers really love using the grid because it gives them something very tangible to lay out their application and understand that a grid is there to help you align typography to align content on, so that you can establish the different areas of your layout on screen, have things be able to align themselves to show a hierarchy and relationships. And developers really like the idea of the grid, and I'm hoping that the developers on this call feel comfortable using the grid as well. So alignment is very important, and for some reason, while I'm presenting over Link here, alignment's not working out in my favor. So I apologize for how things are sometimes represented here on screen. It's just the way that Link wants to render some of the typography that I have in my PowerPoint presentation. So you can use the grid with aligning content, being able to establish space and negative space to differentiate and organize content on screen. And proportion and size it gives you an ability, as long as you align to that grid, you can also show importance and hierarchy with the placement of that content. So here's typography on the grid, and the grid, of course, doesn't mean it's visually represented, but it's here just to give you an idea of what type of units of measurement we're using when you're designing and laying out your application. And you see just simply when you lay out typography at its different sizes and weights on that grid, there's, you see very organized and differentiated bodies of content here. But now let's, take a look at it when you're adding content, mixed media here, typography, maybe photos, videos, et cetera, or just blocks of content here. And, you have, established means of aligning content to a grid and knowing how to provide enough spacing between bodies of content in the grid, between sections of content on your screen. And this is what we call a silhouette. And as I mentioned earlier, go to design.windows.com. Everyone's going to ask, where can I get this? Where can I get all these specifications? An updated silhouette just like this is provided at design.windows.com for you as a reference when you're designing and laying out your applications. But, this is a silhouette that shows you a typical layout. Now, what I don't want you to do is abide by it as law and not deviate from it at all. You don't deviate from the grid, don't deviate from the type ramp, don't deviate from usage of the app bar and the margins that we specified here, but don't use these templates straight out without any modification, because you know what I'm seeing recently? I'm seeing a lot of designers and developers, the apps that get in front of me for review that look identical to each other because they're using the templates. I can tell when they're using the templates because one app from the next look like the templates that are provided with Visual Studio or the templates that we provide as Photoshop files on design.windows.com. Please, 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 please use them as a basis of your design, and then feel free to explore that grid within those content areas with size and shape and colors and typography. Change the layout. Don't just use these templates. Don't just use this silhouette. So you can see here we have a lot of specifications. I don't think I need to go really deep on this because you can find this online, but we have very specific margins when it comes to the silhouette. The baseline being 100 pixels from the top of the screen, and the left margin always being 120 pixels from the left. And starting your body content, at 120. And you can see, this silhouette applies to that RSS Reader app that we've been iterating here. And you see why we deliver this consistent layout. People remember and have learned behaviors of how they interact with content, and they remember the content that's on screen. And they can also expect how they should interact or expect how content flows within an application when they go back to it and say, this is what a Metro-style Windows 8 application looks like, and this is how I expect to interact with it. But as you see, you can have varied layouts using that silhouette for your application without looking the same. And these are all reference applications. These aren't branded with specific brands. You can imagine, with your typical brands or your own brand being placed in there, how recognizable it will be and how much of an immersive experience you can deliver by using your own brand, your colors, your typography, but still using our Metro-style silhouette to deliver that experience. You can see these are various templates that show variation of layout while still using our silhouette. But as I said earlier, I want you to really exercise using varying sizes and proportions to not just represent what the templates have provided you, but represent what your brand wants to deliver, your experience for your application. Use your creativity, use your content and your assets when you're delivering your application and when you're designing and developing your application to create an app that's very differentiated from other apps that are being delivered in the Windows Store. You can also use positioning. And Cocktail Flow is a great example of that. Thank you. So as you can see through size and proportion and positioning of content, and this doesn't mean that everything is a photo in these tiles here. There could be blocks of text. There could be blocks of content. I love Cocktail Flow is a good example. Thank you for bringing that up. This is just a generic layout here showing how you can differentiate from content type to content type in different shapes and sizes of tiles on screen, and Cocktail Flow represents this very well as well. So download and install it and experience it for yourself. Fast and fluid now. This is another one of the 5 key principles of Metro style UX design. And what does it mean to be fast and fluid? There's continuity through motion, and that means from a perspective of showing transition from state to state, from screen to screen, from interactions of touch and interacting with the mouse or keyboard, and having a simplified flow from screen to screen, from content to content through the flow of your user's completion or experience of your application. Sure. So what you've heard about with the charms earlier, can I explore that in the next? Because I actually talk about that in just a moment, with winning as one, and I will totally address that, and we can go deeper on that. Okay, Brian? So with fast and fluid, motion brings life to Metro design language. You've probably experienced this a little bit so far if you have a Windows phone or Xbox, or you're running Windows 8, any previous version, or the current release preview. But there's subtle transitions and animations that don't slow down. They're very purposeful. They bring life to the experience, but they also show transition. They show, the screen rendering. They show that you're moving from one state to the next, from screen to screen. And the thing is I'm not giving you extra work here. When people hear that I want you to provide transitions or animations or some types of visual cues of interaction and feedback to the user, people think, oh, now we have to look at everything that we're doing and design all these animations and all these different types of interactions that are required or being recommended when I design a Metro-style Windows 8 application. The thing is that we actually provide all this for free. We have an animation library. If you go to design.windows.com, and if you go down and you find our animation library there, you'll actually see that we have an entire library that's provided for free in Visual Studio, and we actually have categories for each one of them where we recommend you use them for starting up your application, transitioning from screen to screen. All these animations are provided for free. So when we ask you to use them, we're not asking you to design and develop them. We're asking you to just reference the library and insert them where necessary. Just as, simple things that are included with the operating system when you swipe in from the right, or you swipe in from below, or you initiate any type of touch user. We've timed all these events too, so the risk at trying to design your own animations or transitions is that they may not be timed properly. We've timed all these events so they don't slow down a user, and they're very subtle and are purposeful and not gratuitous and provide any type of obstacles or roadblocks to people interacting with their content. Now, you may, for some reason, somehow need to have a very custom animation. Be sure to test it, be sure to time it, be sure that it's purposeful and adds to the value of experience and doesn't slow down a user. These are just some simple animation items that we have in our library. There's a lot more when you go to design.windows.com, but as I said, they're free. Use them, and you'll delight your user and provide a lot of excitement and immersion in your application if you use these animations. And you know, when you're designing for types of users, there's one thing you have to think about when you're thinking about being fast and fluid. You also think about scenarios and how users are going to use your application. Some are intended, and sometimes you may not know how users are going to use your application, because, you know, think about one of the most versatile devices is a tablet. You know, people can hold it in landscape, they can hold it in portrait, they can interact with it, you know, very passively or very immersed when they're trying to be very efficient. So there's different types of ways that people are going to use your application, and not saying that you have to design for all of these, but just consider your application, your target audience, and the way they may be using it. You may not know that your application is going to be used on different, you may have targeted in your mind that should only be on a laptop or a desktop, but people will be installing it on a tablet form factor, and vice versa. You may not know that people will be downloading and installing your application that you maybe only targeted on a tablet form factor on a desktop and a laptop, and have a different context of use. So, you know, some people will say, well, the only required a view of my application should be landscape because that's the way I can target all form factors. But you know what? If you're a reader application, like a news reader, I would anticipate users really wanting to have it in portrait as well, because they may like to hold their device if they're using your news reading app in a tablet form factor in a portrait aspect. What types of use scenarios people are going to use your application and what type of devices they may use it in. You can't guarantee that if you're just targeting one device, that'll always be installed on that device. Just think about these things. Panning, just a quick note here. We like to keep panning always on one horizontal rail here, meaning that we don't want to have multiple types of scrolling and panning occurring on the screen. If there's a pan, don't put scrolling on it, so everything is just one motion and one means of interacting. What happens is we see there's a lot of confusion if, say, at the hub level here, and you can pan left and right at the horizontal level, and then people don't understand that maybe sections of content can be scrolled. It creates a lot of confusion, and it doesn't deliver a great experience. So limit your axis of panning to just one axis. Horizontal, of course, is preferred, but vertical can be in a snap view. And I don't know if anybody's had an experience with snap view, but we can talk about that in a moment. So right here, as a don't have two areas of scrolling on screen. And you know, thinking about being fast and fluid, it's just not only about the look and feel, as I was saying earlier. You know, you can also think about being fast and fluid of things that the user doesn't see, that they just experience, of roaming like their profile settings in the background, you know, having things saved from device to device to device, so that when they install the application or use another device, or they lose a device, if they have multiple devices in their environment, that they don't have to always reset their profile settings. So that could be a part of that fast and fluid experience, being able to start up where you just left off. A good example of that could be with Windows 8 right now. If you say you want to sync your settings, I have about 5 Windows 8 devices in front of me right now, and every single device has all my settings sync between apps, with my operating system, with my, my themes, so my colors, my backgrounds, and all my associations to my social networks like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So it makes a very fast and fluid experience for me when I go from device to device to device, because I don't have to set up my profile over and over and over again. But it's also, I can control that if I don't want to sync some settings. So it's not everything. If there's some privacy or security issues, or just trying to, separate things from work and personal, you have full control over that. But just think about that when it comes to being fast and fluid, it's not only just what you see on screen, it's also the experience of what you don't see on the background. Authentically digital, a lot of times, this can apply in two different ways. A lot of times people think about physical metaphors when they're trying to deliver digital experiences. That could be from a perspective of skeuomorphism. That's a word that you may or may have not heard, but that's using physical attributes like wood grain, leather, stitching, lined paper to deliver a digital experience that has a relationship with a physical object, item, or experience. And that could be like a notepad. Why does a notepad on a digital screen have lines? There's no requirement for lines. I'm not writing on a notepad via hand necessarily on screen if I'm typing, so there's really no guidelines in a notepad that are required so that I can write on top of to align each line of text that I'm writing or typing on screen. So why have a yellow notepad on screen with blue lines when that's just really distracting from the notepad? And it could be much more than that. Why can't it be much more so that any type of content, typed, photos, videos be embedded? And if you have an experience, say, with OneNote, I think that's a really good note experience that goes beyond the physical metaphor of a notebook. And also, it also just means going beyond from the perspective of setting improper expectations with users, or constraining your application. Because a lot of times when you think about physical metaphors, and if you embrace those physical metaphors, what you're actually doing is limiting what your application can do or the experience can do. Pixels on screen, digital experience could be much more than just those pixels on screen. It could be shared out to people. It could be searched from within the application, searched from another application. It could, provide so much richer content. So, reducing your application to a physical metaphor constrains and puts limitations on it. Break free of that, because digital can be so much more, and so it can do so much more than what the physical counterpart sets boundaries for. So, think about, icons typically in the past represent and set false expectations and relate things to past or physical experiences. But, these things are becoming less and less common than the digital counterparts. I don't pick up a calculator that often anymore. Maybe some of you do. And I don't own a calculator anymore. I use calculators that can be so much more than a physical calculator. Notepads, yes, we have notepads around us a lot of times, but we're coming into a time and place where notes on digital experience can be so much more than just the notepads that you experience. And some children today don't even, have not even used a real notepad. They've been, their first experience with a notepad might be a digital experience. Calendars, so much more, you can do so much more with the calendar than just a paper counterpart. And I don't know about you, I don't put stamps on letters much anymore. I think I buy 24 stamps a year, and I use 5 of them, and we're, everything's handled online. The physical counterparts don't really have that much to do, and that has very little relationship to the digital counterparts that you're delivering or using today. So, and also, from going back to the inspiration of having clear and simple iconography or symbols to represent things today also translate very well from user to user, from language to language, from understanding of their digital world. So, when you're looking at experiencing a digital world, don't constrain yourself to what physical metaphors or physical representations such as past iconography would constrain and limit you to. I'm going to go by some of these here. Being authentically digital and being really, breaking beyond of what physically you would experience, say, a Zoom would be, is looking at semantic Zoom. I told you earlier that I want people to really express themselves through semantic Zoom. So what this is here is some ways that we've provided wireframes of what semantic Zoom could be. And when you pinch out and you have a collection of items, a collection of content, you can represent so many attributes, not just showing things from a high level. So taking that metaphor of sea level versus 30,000-foot view, this is a shopping cart. And in this example, I have other attributes here that I can associate. I have items, I have item numbers, and I have colors. And if I were to pinch out, I can add so much more visualization to it. It's not just zooming out and seeing things from a high level. It could be giving me visualizations of understanding what type of content I have and how I can make decisions on that content or understand that content at a high level with more value being presented through different types of attributes shining through. So let's go to, like, saying a bookstore. I have adventure books, I have anthologies, etc., different categories of books. I pinch out the zoom, and maybe I can have a bar graph representation of the quantities of books that are in each one of those areas. Maybe, when it comes to mutual funds, I can find a value that if I pinch out of all these securities, that I not only see the representation of my funds or my categories of funds, but I also show their performance in real time, if they're up or down or flat, represented by gray, red, and green. Messages. Right, and say, Twitter messages, Facebook messages, emails, etc. Maybe when I pinch out to a semantic zoom, being much more than zooming out, I'm showing a number count across all. They are being designed. I've seen some really great things happening with semantic zoom. I want you to consider using semantic zoom. When you don't use semantic zoom, people sometimes get frustrated with your application. I see people, when they're looking at large bodies of content and they pinch out and it's not there, they get frustrated. So use it at its bare minimum to have people navigate large bodies of content or items within your application, but think about how much more it could be just besides zooming out and jumping to content. Looking at these visual representations here as examples and inspiration of what you can use semantic zoom for. So let's get into charms here. Brian, answering your question. I know we're limited on time. I appreciate everybody taking your afternoon or your morning here to listen to me speak, and I want to make sure that we get all the content out here. So yes, we are addressing charms here. The last tenet or principle of Windows Metro style UX design is winning as one. And what does that mean? With the use of contracts, there's something beautiful and organic that occurs here. When we think about 1 + 1 = 3, what kind of crazy math is that? Is that, you're not the only application. The application that you design and develop and publish to the store is not going to be the only application that people install. They're going to be downloading and installing, hundreds, if not thousands of applications. And there's going to be these organic interactions, and you have to anticipate or, just realize that people can share to and from your application if you allow them to. People can search to and from your application if you want them to. People can be able to use your application and be able to interact with other devices like screens, televisions, audio devices, etc. So what we've done with the charms when it comes to sharing and searching is allowed for you to not have to rely on integrating APIs of saying, third-party applications and making decisions on what is the trending applications or APIs. So let's talk about share first, and we'll talk about search second. There's a lot of people here, and I'm sure you're thinking about, applications that rely on third-party social networks, third-party APIs to be able to interact with, share to, share from, etc. But what we've done is created an infrastructure in Windows 8 and with Metro-style applications where you don't have to think about that anymore. Let the user decide what APIs, what sharing applications they want to be able to interact with your application and not having to keep up and integrate those APIs. So you have an API that you've integrated, there's a number of things you have to do here. One, you have to decide which APIs are appropriate, what are in demand, what are trending, right? How many people are, had to rush to, when they were taken by surprise by Pinterest and they had to rush to integrate that API into their application, right? Or when somebody changes their documentation or their API and you have to fix it because now everything's broken within your application. What we've done is create an infrastructure so that when an application is a social network, they can be shared too. If you design an application that can be shared too, other apps can share to you as well. So it is their responsibility to maintain the integrity of their application on Windows 8 so that every other application can share to them or share with them. Same thing is with search. Search is very powerful now. You can search by using the search charm and always having the search area. Everybody knows by their consistent use and learned behavior of using the swipe from the right or using their mouse or keyboard to interact with, to bring up the search charm to search your application. They can search while they're in the application. They can search while they're outside of your application, and they can search from other applications to your application at any time. And by default, if I'm in your app that you've designed and developed, you publish to the store, I download and install your app, I can search from within the application always by triggering the search charm. But if I want to search outside of your application for any reason, I can then just select other targets while still remaining in your application and going back into your application. So it's a very powerful way of providing a consistent search experience across the entire operating system, across all apps, in and also outside of online experiences. So you can search to the web from within or outside of any application. If I'm on the start screen of my of Windows 8, I can search to your application immediately and get search results. I can search to your application from inside of another application. So always use that search charm, and if you think it's relevant and appropriate, if you have content to be searched, expose it as yourself as a search provider so that it's always available to users in and outside of your application. And Brian brings up a good point too, is that settings, you don't have to think about putting settings on the canvas, putting settings in your application, because we've provided a charm for you that you can always apply all your settings that you need to expose to your user when they're configuring their application when they just download and install it. So to make it quite simple, is that we've provided areas for you to not have to think about placing these items. You don't have to think about where should I put my search. You don't have to think about where do I place my share to, or sharing with other applications, or sharing out to the web, or sharing via email. You don't have to think about where you should place your settings, because we provided that all for you in the system UI. And, I just want to reiterate that point that Brian brings up. It's not your job to teach people how to use Windows 8. Everybody will be installing multiple applications, and we will, as Microsoft, teach people how to use Windows 8. If you actually break outside of these guidelines and try to establish your own design patterns, you're actually going to be outside of an expected and learned behavior and experience that people are going to be anticipating when they're using your application. So please, please, please follow our guidelines. You'll be able to deliver a consistent experience that other applications are delivering, and it'll be a very very desirable and satisfactory user experience across all applications, especially if you're following these design principles. So in essence of time here, I want to make sure we have an open time. Maybe we only have 5 minutes left here. I'll go ahead and open up for discussion here. I really want to thank everybody for sitting through this. This is a lot of content that I had to try to just distill the essence of, because this is an 8-hour session or an 8-hour training day that has multiple deep dives into each one of these areas that I've had to kind of condense into an hour and a half. So I really appreciate you going at, listening to me at a very high level. But if you want more content, go to design.windows.com. And please contact me if you ever have any more questions. My email address is sean.seibel@microsoft.com. So thank you very much. I'll go ahead and open it up to more questions here. We've got about 5 minutes left. Please do either send questions on IM, or you can actually go to voice if you'd like.
Hey, Sean, you've given new meaning to fast and fluid. When I saw that you had 113 slides, I never thought you'd get through it. So this was an awesome presentation. I really enjoyed it. So if there are any questions, go ahead and unmute. I can actually unmute you if you're having trouble with that. So go ahead or put some questions into the IM window. Otherwise, this is a recorded session. We'll post it sometime next week.
And I never tell people how many slides are up front, because it usually scares them. So I didn't realize you knew how many slides I had. Does it show on screen to everybody?
It shows in mine.
Okay.
So I think that's because I'm presenter mode. All right. Well, let's see. Laura's typing, so we'll give her a chance to ask a question. Okay, it's showing on Laura's. All right. So now we know. You scared us from the very beginning. All right. Well, if there are no questions, we'll close out the call. Thank you all so much for joining the call. If you do have follow-up questions, I would invite you to go ahead and post them on the wall where we've posted the event, and then we can maybe send you some questions, Sean, and follow up.
Great. And, I'm here, as I said, to enable everyone who's delivering a Windows 8 Metro-style application to achieve design and user experience success. So I'm here for you as a user experience evangelist. You have any questions, anytime you have a challenge, you need to be pointed in the right direction, I'm always here. So just send me an email, find me online. I'm always happy to answer your questions.
All right. Thanks a lot, Sean. Everybody have a great weekend.
You're welcome. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
We'll see you on M Squared. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.